Hello, welcome to this episode of Low Carb in the Leaves with me, Dr. Mary Barson. It's a public holiday in Victoria today. Sadly, I have to go to work though. I'll be starting an on-call shift soon. So, this week I've been talking about real food, in defence of real food, and diving into some food myths that are around. Definitely not all of the food myths that are around. There is an enormous amount of misinformation out there. And today I was going to talk a bit about meat. And I have certainly discussed this topic before, and I'm sure I will again, about the role that animal foods have in our diet. I've said before that there is no one single optimum human diet. There just isn't. And I mean, this is one reason why the dietary guidelines have been so disastrous. It's only one reason why. Unfortunately, the dietary guidelines are informed by quite outdated science that is mostly sort of association-based, correlation-based studies, which is not the highest level of not the highest scientific standard. But when we can't really tell people exactly what to eat because we are all different. However, there are some core principles that I think apply to all humans to guide our food choices and what we should eat. And for me, it makes a lot of sense to look at this from various angles, to look at it through the lens of evolution and our ancestral diet, to look at it through the lens of biology, archaeology, what we ate, medical anthropology, also comparative anatomy, and my favourite lens by far for me, which is the biochemical and physiological lens. And when we look at it through these lenses, it shows that the natural human diet includes both plant and animal foods. But being the incredibly adaptable creatures that we are, we can do just plant foods and we can do just animal foods, probably, provided we do it sensibly. And there are schools of thought out there trying to demonise meat and animal foods, and schools of thought they're trying to demonise plants and plant foods. And I really believe that the truth is different for every single person, and it's somewhere in the middle. As always in medicine, the answer to what should I eat is it depends. And it depends on your cultural view, your metabolism, your weight, your health goals, a whole lot of things. But meat. So, biochemically, through the biochemical lens, we have about 20 amino acids that we have to eat, that we cannot manufacture ourselves. Amino acids being the building blocks of protein. Protein being the building blocks of cells and our entire bodies. And there's about 40 vitamins and minerals, those micronutrients that we need. I say about because we're still discovering more. One of my favourite B vitamins, choline, was only discovered in the 1990s. So I would be extremely surprised if we know everything that there is to know about nutrition. I am certain that we don't. So it's still an evolving field, which is wonderful. And meat has been demonised for a really long time. And it has been unfairly demonised. There's studies saying that that vegetarians or people on a plant-based diet lived longer. These studies compared Seventh-day Adventists in America to the general American population, which tends to be omnivorous. However, this is a terribly biased comparison, because Seventh-day Adventists, as well as having a plant-based diet, also embrace many, many other healthy lifestyle factors that really compounds the conclusions. Is it the absence of meat that makes them healthier and live longer, or is it the plethora of other healthy lifestyle choices that they make? You can't tell. This is the problem with associative studies. Association is not causation. And then other studies looking at more moderate sort of studies where they adjusted for these other healthy variables and looked at people who had largely comparable lifestyles, but one group ate a plant-based diet and the other one was omnivorous. Really, the improved health expectancy with plant-based diet just went away. It didn't exist. So I don't think that we can reasonably say that eating meat shortens our lifespan, despite the fact that a lot of people would like to say that. Also, I mean, meat has been demonised because they say it contains saturated fat, which it does, absolutely. But so do plant foods. I find this very, very strange that, first of all, saturated fat has been wrongly demonised as a cause of heart disease. There's been exhaustive reviews. In fact, a recent meta-analysis looking at over 600,000 participants in total says, and I've got the quote here, that current evidence does not clearly support the cardiovascular guidelines that encourage increased consumption of polyunsaturated fatty acids and lower consumption of total saturated fat. There is no association between saturated fat intake and heart disease when you look at the scientific literature. But still, that idea that saturated fat is bad for us is so deeply ingrained in our psyche that most people wouldn't even question it. And then the next leap was that saturated fat is from animal foods, and so therefore animal foods are bad. Butter and dairy products and eggs and meat. And it is true that they contain saturated fats, but so does olive oil. So do lots and lots and lots of plant foods. In fact, pretty much all the foods that we eat that contain fat have both saturated and unsaturated fats in them to varying amounts. And possibly the most concentrated source of saturated fat that we consume nowadays is coconut oil, which is plant-based. It's a vegan-friendly oil. So it's really quite nonsensical, and certainly we don't need to worry about that. And then there's this idea that red meat causes cancer. If you increased consumption of red meat has been associated with increased cancer rates. And again, this is an association. An association does not equal causation. They aren't the same. And the problem with a lot of these studies is that increased red meat consumption is also associated with increased cigarette smoking, with increased weight, with decreased physical activity levels, with decreased educational levels, decreased fruit and vegetable intake. There's like this healthy person bias, they call it, is that we have been told for so long that red meat is bad for us. So at a population level, generally people who make conscious healthy choices will consciously choose to eat less red meat. And it is impossible to know if it is the red meat that is causing the increased risk of cancer or all of those other all those other lifestyle factors. And also they don't tend to distinguish, between people who are getting their red meat purely from eating Macca's burgers that they wash down with a big Coca-Cola and people who eat, a natural diet, of meat and vegetables and unprocessed foods. So, the dietary guidelines are primarily informed by these observational nutritional studies that have been scientifically outdated. So we kind of need to feel our own way here. And I keep coming back to this principle of real food. If it's a natural food, a food that humans have consumed for millennia, then I think you're on pretty safe ground. Processed food is damaging to your health. Real natural food is good for your health. And you can choose where animal and plant foods fit into that for you. And if it's not working for you, play around with it. There's also this idea that meat is bad for the environment. That's a very prevalent one. And that if you care about the environment, you should be going plant-based. Look, that's a complex argument, and the truth, as always, it's far more nuanced. It would be nice to say, and convenient to just say, meat bad, plants good, from an environmental point of view. But the truth just isn't that simple. It's far more nuanced. And if you're interested in this topic, I encourage you all to look at the website Sustainable Dish, where this American dietitian called Diana Rogers has articulated the point in great depth. And I think it is, I'll just say this point, it is perhaps a little bit stupid the argument is so simplistic. If you could take a piece of pasture-raised steak from a pasture-raised cow, that's made, grown locally, compared to a soy burger that's flown all the way from America that was made out of soy products that they deforested the Amazon to plant the soybeans. And it's got a lot of industrial processes, including industrial components, including industrialized seed oils and all these things. It's wrapped in plastic and it's flown across the earth. Which is better, the soy burger or the steak? You can see it's not a really simple argument. And indeed, many scientists are now arguing that pasture-raised grazing animals are in fact critical to the health of our food growing ecosystem. Rather than being damaging, they're actually really important. I have a puppy in the background, speaking of animals, who's making a lot of noise, digging up her sandpit. And then let's talk about I can't leave without talking about the nutritional impact of meat. And this is where it really shines. Meat is really, really nutritious. It's one of the most nutrient-dense foods that are available. It is a rich source of B12, which is pretty much we can only get B12 from animal products. And people who choose to have a purely plant-based diet must supplement with B12 or they run the risk of B12 deficiency, which is unpleasant. It's a really good source of vitamin D if you're not getting enough sunlight. It's a rich source of iron. It's a rich source of choline, my favourite B vitamin at the moment, as well as zinc. And in particular, nose to tail eating of the entire animal is a great way to get an enormous amount of nourishment and nutrition for your body. So that is my little spiel in the defence of meat. I hope you found it interesting. Have a lovely weekend. Have a lovely long weekend for those of you who are enjoying that. I will have a nice long weekend of working each day, but hopefully it won't be too bad. All right. See you later, guys. Have a fabulous